Thank you, Jerry, for that series of exaggerations. It's a real pleasure to see all of you. Welcome, everyone, to this year's IHI Forum on Quality Improvement in Healthcare. It's so incredibly good to be here with all of you. I have to offer a special welcome this morning to my parents, who are in the front row here. I think they were coming to verify that I actually had a job and that this was real, and indeed it is, of course, as all of you know. And yes, I did do what every devoted son should do when they're in Orlando. I took my mother to Disney World last night for dinner. Thank you. For the past 15 years, I have looked forward to this annual pilgrimage to the Forum to be together with all of you. I can still remember when I first came to the Forum as a medical student. It was 2004. Don Berwick, I don't know where Don is. Don, there you are. Don was at the front of this hall, standing on this stage, launching the 100,000 Lives campaign, reminding all of us that some is not a number and soon is not a time. Many of you will remember that moment. I was on the sides of this hall, somewhere near the back, actually, so think about that for those of you that are over there. I remember that feeling that Don had inspired in me that day. It was a calling, our calling, to change the way we think about safety. It was time to act, time to build a different story, time to change the way health and care were done. I remember sitting in this hall in 2017 listening to Brian Stevenson's beautiful sermon about getting proximal to those most in need, those suffering unconscionable injustice. Brian was actually quite far away from me in this cavernous hall, but the power of his presence and his storytelling filled this room. I remember crying and laughing in 2019 when Father Gregory Boyle came to the Forum stage, placed his watch on the podium, and then proceeded to blow my mind with stories of justice, faith, shared humanity, and second chances for gang members in Southern California. Each of these occasions and many, many others changed something in me. I'm not sure I really realized it at the time, but they did. They did something to and for me. They helped me reorient at a time that was disorienting. They gave me a sense of purpose and presence and belonging when I needed it most. I think every one of my speeches here over the past 4 years has started with something like, "Today we live in a challenging time." And honestly, it's been true literally every time I've said it. The challenges change, but the presence of the challenge hasn't. And despite the incredible things humans achieve every day, so much about our world today feels really, really hard. Violence around the world, whether in the Middle East or in our neighborhoods, or even in our hospitals' hallways, shakes the foundations of who we are and how we understand who we are. Paradigm-shifting threats like climate change and pandemics remake who we are, and even opportunities like the advent of artificial intelligence invites us to ask serious questions about who we might become and what world our children might grow up in. And so we gather here today at the Forum to try and make sense of the world around us and our place in that world. I want to start by telling you about someone I love. This is Gargi Pahuja. Gargi was born at New York Hospital in 1974, the same hospital where I now very occasionally get to practice. Gargi was an effervescent child, so her mother tells me. She was smart, spirited, opinionated. She radiated life, and her parents, struggling to make a lot of other things work, a new marriage, a new business, a new country, invested everything they could into Gargi. By the time she was only 6 months old, it was apparent that something wasn't quite right. She'd fallen off the growth charts, despite a ravenous appetite. She seemed listless and looked pale. A wise and careful doctor suggested the diagnosis of a rare blood disorder known as thalassemia, which is common among people of Indian and Mediterranean origin. A simple blood test confirmed the condition, and suddenly their entire lives were upended. Thalassemia major is a disease of red blood cells. Essentially, those cells are made with an abnormal form of hemoglobin, which prevents them from efficiently receiving and carrying oxygen, leaving the patient severely anemic, fatigued, and very weak. Without blood transfusions every 2 weeks, Gargi would suffer tremendously and ultimately die. Her doctors noted her difficulties and told her family to prepare for the worst. But Gargi wouldn't have it. She wanted too much to live. And so her family did what was needed. They sacrificed everything so Gargi could get those blood transfusions. She got them. And somehow, through miracle after miracle, Gargi rode the cutting edges of advancing waves of medical knowledge, and she lived. But decades of blood transfusions would add up, and despite regular chelation therapy, the iron in the transfused blood that she received would deposit itself throughout Gargi's vital organs. Her pancreas would go first. Infiltrated with iron, she would develop a form of brittle diabetes. Her liver was next, giving Gargi a form of chronic liver disease. Iron would pockmark her lungs and find its way between the muscle fibers in her heart. As her body weakened, Gargi's resolve to help others like her only strengthened. She poured herself into the disease that had defined her, leading advocacy efforts at Thalassemia Action Group and Cooley's Anemia Foundation, and especially dedicating herself to supporting younger kids through the many life situations that she'd had to confront. Even when Gargi was in the hospital, which was often, I remember walking into her ICU room to find her on the phone helping a young person with thalassemia somewhere in the world get connected to the best possible clinical treatment or the latest clinical trial. This is who she was. Even when she was at 20%, Gargi was 100% there for everyone around her. Gargi's final hospitalization started in May of 2012. She'd had trouble breathing. Her heart was failing, and the fluid was accumulating in her lungs. Many efforts were made to help her, but despite those efforts, 72 days later, we lost Gargi at 37 years of age to thalassemia, just days before the first birthday of my son, Zubin, the nephew that she so very much adored. For years after Gargi's death, I despaired, oscillating between anger and a deep and lasting sadness. Why would someone like her, so remarkable, be taken so early? What had she done to deserve so much suffering? Why was she the one? Why? And then I started to realize, very slowly at first, that Gargi had converted her disease into something remarkable. She'd converted it into her purpose. No longer wallowing in self-pity, why me? She had instead made helping others like her into her why. Since this time, I've come to realize that this conversion of curse to cause is actually not uncommon. A few months ago, Don and I had a chance to interview Meg Gaines for our podcast, Turn on the Lights. Decades ago, Meg, a young, vivacious mother and lawyer, received an out-of-the-blue diagnosis, surprising diagnosis of metastatic ovarian cancer. Suddenly, in her early 30s, Meg was talking to numerous physicians who told her to focus on quality and not quantity of life. Meg politely refused and went on a self-described 2-year odyssey into the high-stakes world of cancer care, ultimately discovering that not only were mistakes made in her diagnosis, her liver was not full of tumor, and treatment, a surgery that went wrong, but that there was a solution. And despite the odds, 2 years from diagnosis, Meg emerged, cured and in complete remission. When she went back to her law practice, Meg said, "The work was the same, but I was completely different." Meg described recurring daymares, as she called them, nightmares during the day, as she thought about the thousands of patients throughout the country who were told to go home and focus on quality and not quantity. She, like Gargi, had rejected that premise. And so Meg decided to do something about it. She made this her why. Meg set up the Center for Patient Partnerships at the University of Wisconsin, which helps patients find the best possible cancer care and navigate the messy and confusing world of medical insurance, billing, and costs. so patients don't have to mortgage their children's future to help themselves survive. Meg's center became one of the antecedents to the concept of medical legal partnerships, which today provide legal and navigation services to hundreds of health systems around the country. Like Gargi, Meg converted her tragic and challenging health circumstance into a lifetime of renewed and different purpose. Whether it's because of a life-threatening condition or because of a once-in-a-lifetime historic event like we've all lived through, these days it seems everyone I connect with is thinking in some way about why they do what they do. Earlier this year, I spoke with a high-ranking government official who left their role to fulfill a lifelong dream to become a writer. Last month, a good friend left a prominent role in a technology company to run for elected office. And earlier this year, my wife, an infectious disease and palliative care doctor, who I never thought would ever leave clinical life, decided that what gave her the most joy was spending time with medical students and residents, teaching them about the future of their chosen profession. These kinds of purpose explorations are in the water, it seems. And it turns out that these people in my life are in very good company. A recent McKinsey study showed that nearly 2/3 of American workers said that the pandemic had caused them to reflect in some way on their purpose in life. More than half of the respondents are reconsidering the kind of work that they do. And these explorations are even more pronounced in younger generations, with millennials and Gen Zs 3 times as likely to be reevaluating their work. And yet, work remains an incredibly important source of how we think about our purpose. In the same survey, more than 70% of people indicated that their work was a major driver of their sense of purpose. Interestingly, and perhaps unsurprisingly, there is an extraordinarily strong connection between your why at work and your why in life. 2 years ago at this forum, I gave my talk here on building trust. As I was preparing for that talk, I learned about the work of Harvard researcher Francis Frey, who built a theory of how to build trust on 3 parts: demonstrating empathy for whomever you're trying to build trust with, making sound, logical decisions, and being authentically you. Frey had a simple test of authenticity. She asked people to consider their work personas and their home personas. If they were radically different from each other, Frey described this as a wobble or a challenge in authenticity. And the same may be true of purpose. It turns out that if your purpose in life is radically different from your purpose in your work, you are a lot less likely to stay in that job. According to the research, people who say that they live their purpose at work are 6.5 times more likely to report higher resilience and stay in their job. In healthcare, purpose is more predictive than pay of whether someone will stay in a job. In a study done a few years ago, clinicians from 70 hospitals were asked to describe their hospitals as either profit-driven or purpose-driven, and then rate their job satisfaction correspondingly. Importantly and interestingly, actually both conditions were validated by the study, with clinicians saying they want their hospitals to both do good and to do well. But what was really interesting about the study was when profit and purpose were compared head-to-head, there was no contest. Clinicians are much more motivated by the purpose-driven institution. Healthcare workers want financial stability, absolutely, no question about it. But what drives our joy and meaning is when we feel we are included in the social purpose of our organizations. In healthcare, the available evidence shows that doctors and nurses who have a powerful sense of purpose are more likely to be satisfied, engaged, and resilient in their work. And they are more likely to demonstrate compassion and kindness towards their patients. And not only are we thinking about purpose more and more, we're now learning that finding one's purpose is actually good medicine. An already robust and now rapidly expanding literature is showing that having a strong sense of purpose, a strong sense of your personal why, is associated with better biological functioning, healthier behaviors, and reduced risk of disease, including cardiovascular and neurologic conditions. Psychologists have gone so far as to suggest that finding your purpose is a basic psychological need. and that when satisfied, provides individuals with a sense of vitality, and when absent, leads to tension and dissatisfaction. And I went down a real rabbit hole on this stuff. Sorry. In a real fascinating blew my mind. In a fascinating meta-analysis of 10 studies with over 130,000 study subjects, there's 130,000 people over 10 different studies, they found that understanding one's purpose reduced the overall likelihood of death by 17%. A 17% mortality benefit. That's the same mortality benefit that the original studies had when we discovered that low-dose aspirin would help with the prevention of cardiovascular disease. I'd been thinking about purposefulness and looking at the research on understanding one's purpose when I encountered the recently released Netflix documentary on blue zones. I hope some of you had a chance to see it. I'd had a chance to read Dan Buettner's book on blue zones a few years ago. Dan's a National Geographic reporter, a modern sort of Ponce de Leon, an explorer searching for the fountains of life. Dan decided to travel to places around the world with the highest concentrations of people living past 100 years of age. And what he found there is fascinating reading. He put it into a book, and it includes many important pearls. People who live longer, they move naturally, like you're doing when you get from one part of this hallway to one of the other parts. They move naturally, not by joining a gym or by running a marathon. Those are good and important things to do if you want to do them, but incorporating movement into your daily routine. Centenarians focus on faith. They eat plant-based diets. They somehow eat to only 80% fullness. I don't know how they do that. They have rituals like sharing a glass of wine with their friends. But the thing in this documentary that caught my attention was something that Buettner found in the island of Okinawa. There he learned the concept of ikigai, Japanese for the reason for your being, your purpose. And there it was again in this documentary that I was watching for fun. As I understand it, ikigai is more than just a goal or a passion, it's your why. Importantly, the concept of ikigai adds a conceptual framework, a roadmap perhaps, for all of us to follow. Purpose sits at the intersection of what you love, what you're good at, what the world needs, and what you can earn a living doing. In the film, Buettner introduces us to a gentleman named Harumasa, a master craftsman who at the age of 87 is still making by hand a musical instrument called a sanshin, a banjo-like instrument that almost no one else makes. His purpose, his ikigai, his gift to the world is beautifully handmade sanshin. He loves the craftsmanship of it, the beauty of the music it creates, and without him living his purpose, this craft might be lost to future generations. This is Harumasa's way of connecting with his ancestors, and it's his way of connecting to the many generations that will come after he's long gone. Okinawans like Harumasa have no exact word for retirement, but they do have a precise word for purpose, ikigai, what we love, what we're good at, and what the world needs. A reasonably simple way to understand a complex concept. It's why we exist. It's an intention, a sense of direction, a source of our meaning. It's shaped, no doubt, by social and structural factors around us and by changing life circumstances, which means that purpose is not static. It connects us to who we are, and it evolves as we evolve. At IHI, I feel so privileged and fortunate to find a powerful connection between my personal and professional sense of why every single day. Hearing about how our partners in Brazil have reduced unnecessary C-sections, how colleagues in Australia have built a first-of-its-kind solution to reduce preterm birth, how systems across the United States and Latin America have prevented children who have cancer from dying of sepsis, and how our teams in the Rise to Health Coalition have worked with health systems all across the country to reduce inequities in stroke, cancer, maternity, and cardiovascular care. These findings, and so many others like it, are literally life-giving to me because they connect me to my purpose of helping people build systems like these that make it possible for all of us to live healthier lives. But as soon as I cross the threshold into a clinical environment, I feel my sense of purpose challenged on a regular basis. It feels too pervasive to be a mistake. The system itself seems to have lost its way. It was meant to give, to provide, to help. But instead, our healthcare system, the system we've all devoted our lives to, has become sometimes extractive. Not giving, but squeezing as much as it can out of every clinical exchange and interaction as possible. Forcing false choices between volume or value, mission or margin, safety or equity, profit or purpose. The field is rife with ors, binaries that compel us to posture and take positions. Politics is full of this kind of forced polarization that eliminates nuance and helps no one. It's unrelenting in our lives, unhelpful, and frankly, exhausting. It's not the fault of the people in the system we teach, it's the way the system is built. For many of us in healthcare, our life's purpose and our work purpose are so closely intertwined, which is why when we feel the purpose being taken from our work in some way, it has even more dangerous effects. Moral injury at work can become real injury at home. Dr. Lorna Breen was an emergency room physician at my health system's Allen Hospital in New York City. In April of 2020, after witnessing the incalculable suffering and loss at her hospital and feeling utterly paralyzed, she died of suicide. In the wake of her suicide, I remember reading some of Lorna's final comments to friends and colleagues. She'd said, "I could no longer help anyone. I couldn't do anything. I just wanted to help people, and I couldn't do anything." The system isn't enabling us to fulfill our primary purpose to help. In fact, it may be preventing us from helping. Whenever I'm in a clinical practice environment, my desire to spend time developing deep and lasting connections to my patients runs into direct conflict with the need to move on to the next activity. I know I'm supposed to ask what matters. I know I'm supposed to ask what matters because that's what I teach in my IHI job and what I try to do around the dinner table every night. But in my clinic, I often forget, and even more often, I just run out of time. At first, I feel guilty, but that quickly turns to anger at a system that for over 20 years has systematically separated me in some way from my purpose. And I know I'm not the only clinician in this room who has experienced this. I think it's time we take back our system, time that we restore our purpose, time to reconnect to our ikigai. It's hard to contemplate fixing the vast and enormously complex healthcare system, but we don't need to boil the ocean. We need to start by starting. And as I was thinking about how to do this, here again, the image of Harumasa sanding down the long neck of his sanshin came back into my mind. We don't need to solve all of it, and certainly not all of it at once, and not all at once. We need to find our sanshin, our contribution. No matter how big or small, find our sanshin that each of us can uniquely gift to those around us. Teresa Fortune found her sanshin. A black woman growing up in Oakland, California, Teresa was brought up to believe that she alone had to be strong through thick and thin. After delivering her daughter, Aliyah, who you see here in the picture, Teresa experienced paralyzing postpartum depression, leading her to the brink of suicide. This surprised Teresa, and she felt unprepared and alone and abandoned. But in her words, Teresa made a decision to stay, and having made that choice, she devoted herself to creating awareness about postpartum depression, racism, and poverty, and undoing the pervasive and pernicious myth of solitary individual strength. Teresa made an absolutely stunning film, which I'd commend to all of you, From the Ashes, where she brings awareness and attention to depression, racism, inequities, and injustice. Tina Shah found her sanshin, noticing that many of her clinical colleagues were burning out from long work hours, excessive documentation, and wasteful prior authorization. Tina started a group called PACT, Patients and Clinicians Together, which focuses on making it easier for both patients and clinicians to engage in the legislative process. The first issue they're tackling is prior authorization in the state of New Jersey. The group started slow, but steadily gained traction, attracting the attention of the Medical Society of New Jersey and social media stars like you can see here, like Dr. Glockenflecken. I got his name right. Excellent. In the end, they got more than 5,000 letters sent to legislators in New Jersey reviving a bill that just yesterday was passed through committee and onto the floor. The bill greatly improves prior authorization across the state. It doesn't eliminate prior authorization, but it makes it far more sensible. And more importantly, TINA and PACT have built a proven pathway for clinicians and patients to get involved in the process of creating laws that can actually change the way the system fundamentally works. Meera Pahuja, my wife, found her Sanshin. As a clinician and medical educator, she noticed how the hidden curriculum in medicine was eliminating the optimism, joy, and love from trainees as they grew more accustomed to how the system worked. At Virginia Commonwealth University, Meera and her colleague professors built a multi-year curricular pathway designed to inoculate their students against disillusionment. Through courses on ethics, social drivers of health, professionalism, and empathy, trainees explore what they believe and what they value, and how to avoid compromising those values as they advance through their careers. Her students are not jaded, they're not demoralized, they are activated and they are engaged, successfully eliminating race-based algorithms in their healthcare system, publishing about health equity, and getting into the communities where their patients live to understand the realities of the people that they serve. These examples and the work of Gargi and Meg that I described earlier demonstrate the power of what individuals discovering their purpose can accomplish with ripple effects that, like Harumasa's Sanshin, will last for generations. For some of you, connecting to your purpose will be intuitive. For others, you're probably asking yourself what this guy is asking me to do. I know. Let me be clear. Understanding what matters to you, your purpose, is absolutely critical. It's vital to you, of course, fundamentally, but also to your patients and to the systems in which you work. So how do we go about doing this? How do we make this connection to our ikigai? A few ideas. Find some space and time to reflect. You've come here to this forum, taken a moment out of your normal routine. Now is the perfect time to get started. Find a partner. A trusted friend can really help you engage in this discussion. Listening to others describe what gives them purpose can help us connect to our own. Have some courage. It's very hard to be honest with ourselves sometimes, especially when we have set up our lives around the choices we've already made. Connecting to our purpose can challenge us, and it can raise some fears. Fears of the unknown, of uncertainty, of change. Having a partner to do this with can really help keep you going when it becomes difficult. And fundamentally, at the heart of our purpose is our story. So tell your story. This one's probably the easiest to say and the hardest one to do. So maybe some prompts will help you. Prompt engineering is now a thing, so I'm trying to engineer some prompts for all of you. Consider these prompts. When did you last feel your work was effortless? How interesting. Tell me a story about something that really matters to you, and then describe why you picked that story. Name something that you've accomplished that you're really proud of. On Sunday, here at this forum, the staff and faculty of the IHI have been here for a long time, so they were here on Sunday, and they got a chance to consider this question. Tell me about the last time you were wildly happy. People love this exercise. Got a lot of great stories. And it led to beautiful stories of family reunions, connections to the natural world, supporting people that are vitally important to us. It can be hard to think directly about your why, but we can all tell stories of what matters to us. And with a good navigator, it'll lead you directly to your purpose. And all of this got me thinking, what if our whole system, the system in which we work, could work this way? How might we build a health and care environment that trusts us, the people in our systems, the patients and clinicians, a system that optimizes for our ikigai, for our original and intended purpose? Wouldn't that be a pretty terrific place to work? What would such a system look like? How might it be designed? And how do we fight to make it real? Over the years, IHI has had the privilege of actually working with many organizations that have taken steps towards this future. And seeing their results, I am now convinced that this is the new frontier in quality. From the days of standardization by Ernest Codman, through the evolution of statistical tools for quality by Schuhart and Deming, through the collaborative improvement models of Batalden and Berwick, we have increasingly made the pursuit of better quality more grounded, more scientific, more collaborative, and more innovative. But despite these incredible achievements, we have struggled with getting to full scale, ensuring true and lasting sustainability, and eliminating the silos that separate quality, safety, experience, and now equity. These three sentinel problems, scale, sustainability, and silos, I believe are all symptoms of a broader disease, which is a lack of true systemness. The next generation of quality must cure this problem. After studying hundreds of total quality management systems in dozens of countries that IHI has the privilege of working in, there is a distinct pattern to those who do this right. Systems that succeed in overcoming these challenges embed quality directly into the daily operations of their system. Instead of quality on the side, embedded quality becomes the system that clinicians and managers use to conduct daily practice. Gene Kim and Steve Spear, Steve's at this forum, so please seek him out, but Gene and Steve wrote a book, in their new book, just a few weeks ago, Wiring the Winning Organization. They call this phenomenon social circuitry of an organization, the overlay of processes, procedures, routines, and norms that enable people to do their work easily and very well. Winning organizations knit disparate information and quality initiatives together into a practical, technology-enabled management system that improves care for patients and reconnects clinicians to their purpose. I don't really know what to call this phenomenon. Please help me name it. But systems that pursue this kind of embedded quality exhibit a set of characteristic behaviors that are common across all of them. They understand that our people are our most valuable asset. Whether you are a clinician, a patient, or a family member, and many of us are more than one of those things, the people in our systems are our best and our strongest asset. Systems that embed quality understand that they must harness the brilliance of their people at massive scale. These systems know that healthcare is complex and that that complexity needs strong default systems. There was a time when healthcare was a relatively simple enterprise. With few medicines and few team members, the clinicians of a century ago had few opportunities for error and miscommunication. But healthcare today means dozens of people working together in ever-changing teams, delivering an expanding array of life-saving interventions. Complex industries have a maxim that we need to learn in healthcare. We rarely rise to the level of our aspirations, but we will always sink to the level of our operating systems. These embedded quality systems recognize that social admonitions to improve cultures rarely or perhaps never work. For systems to continuously improve, we must have a culture of learning and improvement. But seeking a transformed culture without building a system to create it is like seeking a culture of timeliness in an organization without clocks. It's essential to have that social circuitry in place to cultivate the culture we hope to achieve. Embedded quality systems do not see safety, equity, and experience as silos. At the point of care, where all the value is actually created, it is essential that we integrate the management systems for safety, quality, equity, experience, and efficiency into a single high-functioning operating system. Managing these domains separately suboptimizes the management of them all. And finally, they believe in real transparency. Regular publication and reflection on outcome data that matters to patients and caregivers is a key behavior of systems that embed quality. These data are readily available to frontline care teams, leaders, and to our patients. I feel we have constructed all kinds of false narratives around not being completely transparent with our patients. They won't understand, they will call us constantly, they will sue us. None of this stuff is true. Programs like Kedar have shown that being transparent with our patients actually reduces liability claims, increases trust, and leads to fewer calls and complaints. It's time for us to end this nonsense. Patients deserve to know what matters to their health. Health systems that have embedded quality into their operating systems in these ways have created unbelievably amazing results worldwide. Here are a few examples. John Gleason and Corby Miller developed and deployed an embedded clinical operating system at Prisma Health, an 18-hospital system in South Carolina, leading to striking declines in sepsis mortality across their system, radical improvements in patient safety, and stunning year-on-year improvements to care experience across over 300 care settings. And they got there in a hurry. The bottom axis on all of these graphs is 18 months. When we move to operating systems for quality, we can achieve major improvements in relatively short time horizons. At Hamad Medical Corporation, halfway around the world, Nasser Al-Naimi and Dr. Hanan Al-Kuwari embedded a value management operating system that has led to dramatic improvements in flow and utilization. Here are data demonstrating reductions in discharge delays. These efforts and others led to an 80% reduction in unnecessary bed days within 7 months. Remarkably, Hamad has made these improvements while simultaneously improving or increasing the joy in their healthcare workforce. Systems work can be equity work. WellSpan Health Clinic's operating system has reduced disparities in cancer screening, diabetes care, and care for substance use disorders. In 2023, WellSpan found over 51,000 patients overdue for colon cancer screening. Leaders like Mike Seam and Roxana Gatzper activated their system, and a third of these patients were screened, with year-on-year improvements of 8.7% for people of color. Over the lifetime of those individuals, this program will return an astonishing 2,430 years of life to 345 people who will now live cancer-free. Systems with embedded quality have clear technical parts. They have safety management systems that with escalating huddles, visual management, real-time electronic triggers, just culture, and great catch programs. They have experience management systems with direct coaching of frontline care team members, feedback mechanisms so patients can tell us in real time how their care is going. And they have staff well-being systems focused on removing the daily headaches that consume our people and reduce our joy. But just as importantly, they are led differently. They are led by leaders who show up, who are transparent, who are authentic, and who live the values of kindness, trust, curiosity, and action. These leaders are builders, and they are gardeners. They build great systems, and they tend to them with care and attention. They know that the current systems, with its daily hassles, crushing documentation, excessive measurement, and misdirected incentives, often crowds out the purpose in our work. And so these leaders have chosen to build systems that make the experience of giving and receiving care joy-giving, reconnecting each of us to our ikigai, and linking those to the aligned purpose of the whole organization. When this happens, it can feel almost magical. The system starts working the way it's supposed to. These photos are all from a recent visit to the Greater Baltimore Medical Center, which I'm sorry, John and Carolyn, I'm going to invite everyone to visit you. Everyone should visit Greater Baltimore Medical Center. These photos are all from a recent visit there, where data flows to the front line so everyone knows exactly what's going on and what isn't. Huddles happen at appointed hours. Leaders like John Cheshire, Melvin Blanchard, Carolyn Candiello, pictured here, participate in every team huddle. People at every level identify impediments in the system that are getting in the way of them providing the best possible care. And problem-solving tools are put into action right there and then at the frontline care team huddles. The teams are proactively searching for failure modes and risk points, and they contact their business intelligence colleagues like Ryan and Marge in this picture to build graphs and data visualizations. And the people are joyful and they are proud, like Anthony and Michelle here, who stand in front of the transportation board with a zero defect weekend to report on. These systems foster ingenuity, like this team, who built and are proactively testing a relatively simple solution to patient communication, a leave behind card that explains the work of the team that day so family who weren't on rounds can catch up quick. In these organizations, the operating system becomes so embedded, so habitual, that people don't even know that they have it anymore. It's just the way it is now. The operating system fades into the background, and what moves into the foreground is the elegant, simple, refreshingly obvious human-to-human interactions that are at the heart of delivering and receiving care, our ikigai, our purpose, what we are good at, what we love to do, and what the world needs. Operating systems like this help restore not only our individual ikigais, they help restore the entire health system's purpose. This is what embedded quality looks like, and it's what we need now to pursue. It's our shared purpose to help ensure the next generation of quality is imbued with the kind of systemness and social circuitry that will enable every person in healthcare, patient, clinician, and our administrators, to live out their purpose every day. Restoring the experience of living our purpose to healthcare, each of us individually, will restore healthcare to its original and intended purpose. Throughout the pandemic, I thought a lot about a book I read 10 years ago by journalist and disaster chaser Rebecca Solnit. In Paradise Built in Hell, Solnit chronicles major disasters, from earthquakes in San Francisco and Mexico City, to hurricanes in New York and New Orleans, to the Chernobyl nuclear accident and the volcanic eruption in Iceland. As Solnit studied these disasters, she noticed something, and she noticed some fascinating commonalities. When faced with tragedy on a massive scale, ordinary people turn not to their baser instincts, but to kindness, humanity, and decency. In Solnit's words, the study of disasters makes it clear that the prevalent human nature in disaster is resilient, resourceful, generous, empathetic, and brave. During the pandemic, I remember thinking about the characters in our unfolding historic drama, public heroes like Tony Fauci, of course, and so many other hospital leaders and health officials that I had met, but also the everyday kindness and dedication of millions of healthcare workers who went to work every day at great risk to themselves to deliver the care and health that we all needed. Stories of clinical cooperation and ingenuity, stories of ordinary citizens knitting masks and making PPE. I remember coming home one day and driving up my block and seeing that the neighborhood kids had written this in chalk in the street: kindness and love at a scale I'd never seen before. And these stories, it turns out, are common among historic calamities. When pushed to the limits, ordinary people step up. Solnit writes, not all, but the great many, to become their brother's keeper. And that sense of purposefulness and connectedness brings joy even amid death, chaos, fear, and loss. This last bit has always stood out to me as a bit of a curiosity: joy in the face of a horrible situation. But within it, I am convinced, is one of the keys to changing the way things are. Calamity brings disruption. Change forces reconsideration. Disaster compels us to be at our best, and it gives us clarity and a sense of purpose. And that sense of purpose gives the agents of change meaning and then joy. There's an evolution here: challenge, purpose, and then ultimately joy. I remember seeing this in Gargi's face one day in the ICU. I had come to visit her after I'd finished rounding on my patients on the floors below her. She was just staring out the window at the East River, lost in her thoughts, and she was smiling. She was hooked up to half a dozen medicines that were keeping her heart going and maintaining her blood pressure. She'd been through the gauntlet her whole life, and she knew there would still be more challenge ahead. As I took off my white coat and sat next to her, she told me she had just read a quote from Mark Twain, and then she recited it to me. The two most important days in your life are the day you are born and the day you find out why. She never told me exactly what was making her smile that afternoon, and to be honest, I didn't ask. But I like to think that I happened to see Gargi that day, of all days, on the day she found out why. Thank you so much, and enjoy the rest of the forum.